What exactly is exception handling? Okay. So in Java, exception actually is an object. So Java is an object-oriented programming language. So in fact, the exception, thread, all of these are actually an object. Okay. And what it does is it describes the exceptional behavior. It describes the exceptional behavior like something that is not usual. So imagine your program is running. How would you know whether something unusual has happened in your program? So in that case, somebody kind of raises that exception, creates that exceptions, and make it available for you, or make it available to whomsoever are concerned about the exceptions. Okay, whomsoever part will get to know, it will get clarified. But what we should understand is the exceptional, if there is any exceptional behavior, they will get made available. Those exceptional behavior, your code will be made aware that okay, so and so exception has happened. Now whenever an exception condition arises, okay, so there is an object, okay, representing that exception that is created, okay, and it is thrown in the method that caused the error. I think it got cleared here itself. So whenever some unusual behavior happens, what will happen? The corresponding exception object will be created and thrown in the method that is causing the error, that has caused the error. Okay, so who does this part? Creation of exception object and um, throwing the error. We will again get things cleared as soon as we progress. Okay, but understand that whenever any exception happens, any unusual behavior happens, there will be someone who will actually raise that. A good programming language practice, if we follow, there will be someone who will actually raise those exceptions, and it will be thrown in the method which has caused the exception. Now, that method where the exception was thrown, it has two choices. It may choose to handle the exception or pass it on. I'm not worried about the exception, or I'm not familiar about the exception, so I'm gonna just throw it on. Okay, so it's like exception has only two choices. Either you handle or you pass it on, like you throw again or throw. Okay, so there are two scenarios that will happen with any exception object that is made available to the method which raised that exception. Is it clear so far? Yes. All right. Now, let's understand the exception handling basics. So, at some point, as I said, with exception object, it needs to be handled or it needs to be thrown. So you cannot like you cannot do something like okay, I want to do something else. Okay, that option is not available. Either you decide to handle it, or you decide to throw it or pass it on to the caller of your method, and then caller will decide okay what to do. If caller will have two choices, either handle or again it will pass it on. Again, the caller of that caller will be handed over the exception object, and that's how this gets propagated. Okay. Now, at some point, exception object that was created, it needs to be caught and processed. So there has to be someone who will actually catch it and actually process it. It cannot be that everybody decides to pass it on. It cannot happen. Okay, pass it on. Okay, so there has to be somebody who will be handling it. Okay, now only it has two options. Either your Java runtime. So okay, we are talking about the exceptions. So exceptions can be generated by either your Java runtime system or manually by your code or someone else code. Okay, so there are two possibilities who can create the exception object. So exception object can be created by the JVM, right? The Java runtime system, and sorry, or it can manually be created from your code. All right, clear. So we talked about that. Okay. Uh, there will be, so whenever some unusual behavior happens, there will be someone, an object representing that exception will be created, and it will be thrown in the method that has caused the error. So we did that part, but what we are trying to understand is who created that exception, who can create the exception. So what it says is that it can be generated by either your Java runtime system or manually by your code. Anybody has questions? Any questions? Now, any questions? No, right? Okay. Now, any errors that violate the rule of the Java language or the constraint of the Java runtime, those exceptional behavior, only in those scenarios, Java runtime system will actually create an exception and made it available to the current executing method. Again, I will repeat. So if imagine, right? So imagine you have got a Java runtime system, your JVM, and within that your program is running. Those Java runtime system, those JVM has some constraints. They have boundaries, they have restrictions, they have limits. If any of the issue happens in those constraint in your environment where your code is executing, in that case, Java runtime system will throw an exception, throw an error, actually, we call it as error, and it will be made available to the currently executing methods. Okay. Now, in what all scenarios we can throw the exceptions manually from our code? So when we want to report some of the errors, right, condition to the caller of the method, then in that case, we should actually throw the exception. Okay, so we got understanding clear. It can be generated by Java runtime system. Java runtime system will generate if there is some language condition has been violated, there has been some constraint of the Java runtime has been violated, then that error will be generated by the Java runtime system. Okay, and it will be thrown to the current executing method. Clear? And when manually we should go and throw the error when we want some error condition to be made aware of our caller. So if imagine it's like whenever you write a method, you will get an input. What will happen if something goes wrong while processing in your method? If you want your caller of that method should be made aware, then you can actually go and report the error or throw the error from your method manually.